buildings don't need to exchange air. They need to allow high levels of moisture to migrate to the outside if they need to, right? Basically, buildings need to dry.
Hey, so Jess here. I've got a bit of a bonus episode for you today. I actually have found that I've recorded so many interviews, I actually need to get through them a little bit faster. So I'm going to start releasing the odd episode on the off weeks. Not every off week, just some off weeks, so that the gap between recording and releasing is not extending out for too long, because I've got some awesome guests and I want to bring these conversations to you. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation coming up with Steve Baczek, architect. He is a absolute wealth of knowledge in the area of architecture and building science. While I've got you, please remember to click follow on your chosen listening platform. And if you feel so inclined, please leave a review. You can leave 5 stars if you like. I'd really appreciate that. And the best place to leave a review is on iTunes. You can leave a written review there, which would be totally awesome, letting everyone else know how great the show is. All right, I shall leave you with this awesome conversation. Let me know what you think in the comments. Hello and welcome to the Building Sciology Potty, where we talk about better buildings to live and breathe in. My name is Jess Kismet and I am your host. Today's guest is a big voice in the world of building science and architecture in the US and across the world. He has designed over 60 LEED Platinum homes and dozens of certified passive houses, as well as some fantastic work in the zero energy deep retrofit space, including the very first Enefit house in the US. Through his work on The Build Show, the Unbuild It podcast, and his own architecture firm, Steve is a leading voice in our industry, bringing building science to millions. He's known for his honesty, his obsession with durability, and his catchphrase, if it doesn't last, it doesn't matter. I'm very pleased to welcome Steve Baczek to the show. Thank you for joining me, Steve.
No, thank you for having me. Greatly appreciate the privilege.
Awesome. So you're a very practical hands-on architect, and we know through all of your videos you're known for getting deep into the nitty-gritty of detailing on site. I would love to know the history of your career. You've been in the game 37 years. I'm really keen to get into how you got to where you are today, specifically your time at Building Science Corp and what inspired you to create the Build Science series with Matt Rising over the last few years.
Yeah, so, upon graduation from college, graduated in 94, I worked at a large firm in Cambridge, Mass. I was only there a little over a year, did some interesting stuff. They did very high industrial type projects. So it was like just crazy stuff, like huge fan buildings and stuff. It wasn't like the cool architecture, if you will. It was stuff that was on a massive scale that things had to be right because you were dealing with these big pieces of machinery and stuff. But then I got the opportunity, and it was mostly through a link. It was kind of, just good fortune that Joe, who started Building Science Corporation with Betsy. So I'm sure if I say Joe, you understand who I'm talking about.
I do. All the
And for
listeners
those of
may
you that
not.
don't,
Yeah, Steve is talking about
so
Dr. Joe
Joe
Lstiburek.
started Building Science Corporation. Yes, Joe Lstiburek. He was a former Canadian that came south of the border, married Betsy Pettit, and then started Building Science Corporation. And so Joe was at the college that I went to speaking, and Betsy was in the back of the room with the department head, who was a good friend of mine. The one thing about my college career was I went into the military before college. So I was 4 years older than most of the kids in my class. And with that, like some of the professors, like they were friends and such, right? I mean, I could go out drinking when I was a freshman. It's like, and I didn't.
With your
It's already
professors.
beyond that. Yeah. So, it was different. And I concentrated on school, which impressed the professors because it was like, here's somebody doing hard work, details, and getting into what it means to study architecture. And so I would say I somewhat became a favorite of a number of the teachers, but one, the department head. And so he's in the back of the room speaking with Betsy, and Betsy says, hey, we just started a company called Building Science Corporation. We're looking for an architect that, we can hire to help us out. We have this major government contract, which was Building America at the time, which was basically introducing building science to the building industry in the US. And he stopped her short and said, I got just the person for you. And he called me the next day and said, hey, You need to call this woman, Betsy, and tell her that, you're the guy I was talking about. So I called Betsy. It was like midweek. She's like, oh, Joe's going to be home. Why don't you come and meet us on Saturday? So drove to their house, met them on Saturday. Like an hour later, they hired me, and I became the first employee for Building Science Corporation.
Wow, that
And
is a
so it was a series of really good events that I guess they say, you know being prepared for the opportunity is more important, right? So when it comes, you're ready for it.
yeah.
So at Building Science, I got to watch Building Science Corporation grow, but more importantly, I got to see Joe's tact and Betsy's tact on how to deliver building science to the US, what matters. And I mean, I was there for 10 years as a young architect. There's probably no substitute than being able to walk next to Joe Lstiburek for 10 years and just listen to what he has to say, right? Everybody that came in to the office were people that were, A+ level of building science people that came into the office. So I got to meet all of Joe's mentors, like the people he worshiped at the time, and have conversations with them. These are guys that were doing, building science and writing books in the 50s, up in Canada. So, and we all know building physics doesn't change. The materials to combat it might, but basic physics doesn't change. And so it was certainly a privilege to work with Joe, and that just again opened up a number of opportunities when I decided to move on from Building Science Corporation. But even while there, like, I drew a bunch of the drawings that were pretty much all of them that were in the builder's field guides and Joe's books and such. So when you're drawing the details, as a young architect with Joe talking about the building science of them, it really was an education that, I mean, I don't know of any other architect that has the same path as I do. And it's there, I always try and explain it as there's most architects, they will look at a building, they'll design it, and then they try to apply building science. I look at a building and immediately figure out how to integrate building science because that's how I was taught, right? I look at a wall and I just don't look at it as a wall where the windows are going to bring in light and all of that. I look at that from my architectural background, but then I look at it as how am I going to insulate it? How am I going to control vapor? Where's the air barrier in this wall? Is there a way I can enhance this wall aesthetically by maybe adding more insulation to the outside? Or what is it that we can do to integrate sound building science practices into this project?
Yeah. Yep. You had an incredible start in your career. I can't imagine any architecture student more fortunate than to land up on Building Science Corp as, your first, pretty much your first job. Like, that's
Yeah.
incredible. Unbelievable. So let's get into those control layers that you were just talking about. So water, air, vapor, and thermal. These are the 4 control layers, right? In that order of importance.
In
Is
that
that
order of
correct?
priority.
That is correct. Right.
Yes.
Thank you. So in Australia, we focus pretty heavily on the R value in the wall, the insulation, the thermal layer. It's sort of, when a lot of builders call me, we've had a legacy of using foils in our walls, and the focus is on the R value of the reflective air gap next to the foil. So it's all, we sort of focus on the insulation value of the wall rather than the other three things we need to control. So tell us a bit about your thoughts on
Well,
that,
it's one
please.
that's easily understood, right? Well, we do that in America too. Like if you ask somebody, do you build a good house? And they'll say, oh yeah, we build a really good house, R30 walls, right? They immediately jump to the R value because it is a known commodity, right? It's a number that everybody knows. Clients know, builders know, manufacturers know. And so they use that number and people understand simply if it's a higher number, then it's potentially better. And it probably couldn't be more wrong to use that as the priority to how we explain buildings. But that's what we do. Like, because if you try to talk about water management, the problem is how do I quantify it, right? How do I put a number to it or some kind of tag other than water management so that people understand. I mean, that's a much longer conversation. Air tightness, you could put an air tightness number to it, but the number is kind of only one thing, and it's kind of like the insulation, right? You can have a very high R value, but if you're using the wrong insulation in a location that you shouldn't be, then it's probably going to get you in more trouble than it will be get you out of trouble,
Could you
right?
give us an
So
example of the
just
wrong
because
insulation?
you yeah, well, I'll give you a better example. We worked on a project when we were at Building Science Corporation. The project was like 150 years old. The office got the call and wanted us to come and investigate it. And the reason for it was that it was rotting and growing mold and had a number of issues. And when we got there and asked a few questions, like simply like, is there something that changed in the last 10 years? And this is that kind of benefit that you're sitting next to Joe and he's asking these 10 questions. So immediately now I've gained the knowledge of like, what questions should I be asking? And so he was asking them, well, so what changed? And they said, well, we insulated the building about 10
Insulated
years
it.
ago.
Yeah.
And because they insulated it, they totally changed the amount of energy that moves through the wall. And because you totally change the amount of energy through the wall, you change the rate that the walls and floor system could dry and move vapor. And so because you change those numbers without really understanding the changes that you've made, then it caused problems. And it was the wrong insulation to be using. It's like just because it's an dirty, an air permeable bat insulation shouldn't have been used in a location where maybe you should have had something that was maybe less permeable, like a rigid foam or a closed cell spray foam or whatever the case is.
Mhm.
Understanding the different properties of the insulation. And it wasn't only, like I said, working with Joe. I mean, in a short time, I would say probably 5 years, Building Science Corporation went from us three to probably something like nine. And we had a bunch of people that were very, very good in their own disciplines, right? Like we had a gentleman who was formerly a pulmonologist, a doctor, and he came there because Joe wanted to work with him a whole bunch of mold issues and how does our personal health and buildings relate.
Wow.
Understanding and having conversations with Nathan brought me up to speed in that arena. Nathan's brother, Peter, longtime friend. I've probably done a couple hundred lectures with Peter. We always seem to team up at a lot of locations and such. And we know each other enough where we can just get in front of a bunch of people and have a conversation and it just flows very well. But Peter was a former teacher, and builder. So getting his understanding and how to present information, and he's just an all around smart guy. I mean, I still talk to him once a week because he's my go-to when I can't answer the question. I call him. And then we had other people. Coda in the office, who's one of the smartest people I've ever met, and Armin at the time, he did all of the research in ventilation and vapor drive and all of these things, unvented roof assemblies, and so we had all of these people that were doing kind of very specific things. And because I was the architect and would be drawing the details, it's like sometimes I'm working with this person, sometimes I'm doing something with that person. And so it kind of allowed me to cross pollinate with all of these experts in the field to, again, not only did I work at Building Science Corporation, but I got to work with all of these people, which is just it couldn't have been a better situation to gain knowledge as a young architect.
Yeah, it sounds like Joe did a really good job of surrounding himself with all the best people as well as being one of the best himself.
Yeah, and probably the very best thing that Joe taught me personally was that information is not something that we own, right? And what I mean by that is Joe is certainly one of the smartest people that I've ever met in and out of the building industry. He's just a really smart guy. And his idea was that as we get older, it's our duty to pass this information on to everybody else and share it and let them take this information and do what they need to do to it, refine it, modify it, whatever, just like I've done with stuff I learned from Joe. New materials come online and it's like, oh, wow, this would be great for an air barrier, or this would be great to help. the building dry out, doing this or that. And so sharing that information, because I get it a lot from people saying, why do you share all this information? And one, because I was taught, and it's out of respect for Joe and all the people that taught me the things. They were all in that league. I mean, Joe's mentor, Gus Handegord, he wrote books and gave classes and stuff because he thought it was important that this information, like when Gus passes, that information's gone if it's not passed on. And to take someone's life like Gus's, that was basically, 40 years plus dedicated to building science, to basically throw that book in the fire and say it doesn't exist anymore, that's criminal, right? We need to
Hmm.
be able to share that information. And I do that. And the other thing that I've learned is that as I share information, it kind of allows me to clear out my head, so that the information that I'm sharing with you might be like the third generation of thinking of how to install Windows. But while you're absorbing that and thinking, wow, this is a great detail, I'm already on the fourth generation
Hmm.
and developing it, because I was able to clear my mind by passing that information on to you. So now I can take the next step forward with those details and make them better.
Yeah. So learning by doing. Yeah, yeah. Let's talk about sharing information. So grateful for all of the work you've done with all of your YouTube channel, and specifically the Build 101 Build Science series, which has been it's such a succinct collection of really informative videos that take you from the fundamentals all the way through to the 401 series, which gets right down into the detail. 301, 401 gets right down into the detail of some of the things that you're talking about. Excellent resource. If you have not, for the listener, if you haven't had a look at the Build Science series on Matt Risinger's website and YouTube channel, I'm going to put the link in the show notes. I highly, highly encourage you
Really
to,
appreciate that.
strongly, strongly encourage you to go and have a look at it. It's brilliant. So let's
And
have a look.
what's
Let's talk about, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, what's amazing to me is, how little builders really understand building science. And I'm not talking about like the complex stuff. I meet builders all the time that will say something along the lines of, "Man, I really appreciate what you do. I can't wait till I start incorporating building science into our project." And I
Yeah.
stop them right there and I said, "Have you ever nailed two pieces of wood together?" And they're like, "Yes." And I was like, well, that's building science, right? Because I've changed the thermal properties of the two studs by nailing them together. There's a little tortuous path of airtightness between them. The vapor drive across those two studs is different than one stud. So there's a whole bunch of things. The drying rate, the wetness rate, wetting rate, like a whole bunch of things change. And so I
Hmm.
tell builders, like, yes, we're doing some fun stuff in our buildings, but if you're cutting wood, nailing it together and putting it up in a building, everybody's doing building science.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
You just need to, refine what you're doing and get a better understanding of it. But understand you're already doing it. I mean, if you're insulating a building, if you're a builder and you have a subcontractor that's insulating, or you're installing windows, you're doing building science. You might not be doing good building science, but installing a window is building science, right? There's
Hmm.
either no flashing, which is horrible, kind of, halfway there flashing, which is, yeah, okay, we gave it a good try. And then there's the right way to flash a window, which is understanding building science. And so when we set out to do these, and I proposed it to Matt, I said, we really need to go back to the very first stepping block and answer the questions. What is building science? Where is building science? And answer these just very, very fundamental questions, because I know builders that have been building for 30 years that would say that they've never done building science. And it's like, yeah, you have. You've been building for years.
Every day of your career.
And so there's this exactly, they're as good at building science people as anybody. And that's why I go to the job sites too. You mentioned it earlier, is if I want to learn about roofing, probably the best thing I can do is go out to the job site and talk to a roofer that's been doing it for 25 years. And because he's had callbacks, and if you start talking to him about things, he'll be like, oh, yeah, I remember like 10 years ago, early in my career, we went up on this one roof and it was leaking, and this was the problem, and blah, blah, blah. But all of that institutional knowledge amongst all of these subcontractors, like nobody's gathering it. And these guys are retiring and leaving, and like nobody's kind of capturing it. Now, being an architect, I have the distinct privilege of I get to talk to all of them, right? Because that roofer that's been doing it for 25 years, he might have 2 employees. Yes, he's going to pass on roofing knowledge, but those roofers are never going to get insulation knowledge or flashing knowledge from a builder. I get to talk to everybody and become kind of this collector of knowledge that I disseminate in my details, and then I turn around and share it with everybody. And it's really interesting. I'm sure you realize about social media. Like the minute you post something, immediately like 30% of the people, that's dumb, it's too expensive. Who the hell can afford that? Like you get just all of these comments. But what they don't understand in that what I learned is that there's a certain path for us to understand something, right? Like I can't talk about how to enhance insulation in a wall system unless I go beyond a 2x6 wall and R21 insulation. I have to take it to the next level to see what's better. Is it better to screw on a rigid board? Is it better to build a second wall and make it a double wall? Or do I just, spray foam and then put a bat in and enhance the insulation level that way? Like all of this stuff, for those that follow me for a long time, I'm always talking about these are kind of the stepping stones to the next thing. Like nothing I ever say is this is the solution. This is how you should do it. No, this is how I'm doing it now. Because somewhere down the road, someone's going to come out with a better tape or a better sealant or a better thingamajig, and we're going to use it in the building industry, and it's going to enhance the way we do things, right?
Uh-huh.
Maybe we get away from flashing tapes and someone develops a gasket that we simply adhere to the window, slide it in the opening, and it's like a window in a car, right? There's some beefy gasket around this window that now handles all the water management. So there's all of that makes, I absolutely love what I do. And I think the passion shines every time I get to talk about it. But it's because every day is like a new discovery.
Mhm.
We do a new project and it's like, how are we gonna insulate that nook? How are we gonna drop that ceiling for the architectural effect, but still maintain proper control layers and continuity and everything else that I preach? It's how do we make that all happen
37 years in and still learning. Love it.
every day? What I tell people, Jess, is that we're all on the learning curve. We're just sitting in different seats.
Yeah.
Some are up
Yeah.
front, some are a little further in back, but we're all on the same ride.
Love it. Love it. Build Science 101. Let's talk about air tightness. In Australia, there's a bit of a focus at the moment in the building code on increasing air tightness. We've had some research done a few times here. It's sort of each code talks about it in different ways. Now we're having to have like condensation mitigation measures put in. Look, a lot of builders in Australia talk about houses needing to breathe. So, and you make a clear distinction
We have
between air leakage, air leak. Beg your pardon?
we have that same garbage line in America. You
Yeah,
can't do
right.
that. Houses need to breathe.
It won't go away. So let's talk about why a house should be airtight, but the material should be open. Let's discuss this, please.
So I think it's undeniable now with a lot of the research and numbers and such that people are doing, passive house and kind of collectively all of the above, that airtightness is probably as important, if not more important, than R value. Because R value can kind of get you in trouble maybe if you don't have enough R value warming a surface that can condense. An air leak can take 100 times more moisture to that cold surface than vapor diffusion. And that's why I tell people, like in our houses, we concentrate on sound water management. We concentrate on very good air tightness. I mean, I can't remember the last time we've designed a house and fell short of Passive House. I mean, most of them are in like a 0.25 to zero point 0.5 ACH 50. So
Yeah, wow.
very good
Wow.
houses. And because of that, I don't have to worry about vapor because all I'm really worried now about is vapor diffusion. I don't have any leaks in the building that are going to take moisture to cold surfaces. So I really don't pay any attention. When people say, "Where's your vapor barrier?" I'm like, "I don't know. And this wall here, we don't even have one.
So do you
It's in
have
the
your air
middle of the
tightness layer
wall."
on the out? Do you have your air tightness layer
I
on the
always do it
inside of the
usually
frame?
on the outside. I
You do it
usually
on the
do it on
outside.
the outside. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's in the middle of the wall. It depends on what the wall is, but I would say generally it's on the outside of the wall. And I always try and keep it as straight as I can because the problem is when I come down and then have to go out and then back down and back in, or anytime I'm kind of displacing that plane, it becomes a challenge because I have to turn a corner and still maintain continuity. Where if I
And
could stay
what
in the
example would
plane,
that be?
so let's say I'm using zip sheathing as our air barrier, right?
So
I'm going to
zip
put the
sh
window on the same plane as that zip sheathing. So it's pretty
I
much
see what you're saying.
almost
Yep.
straight down the wall, right? Sometimes I'll push the window in a little. I've seen people, remodeling jobs, like they'll put the air barrier on the inside. I understand what they're doing, certainly, but I don't understand why you're doing it. One of the problems is a lot of the products that we deem as high performance air tightness products come from Europe. Excuse me. And the fact that they come from Europe means that, they're solving for European construction. Now, what most people don't realize, European construction is a masonry or terracotta block with stucco on the outside. It's different there on how they build to our wood frame structures in America. That's me. To
That's all right.
take
I've got a
their means to air tightness and just kind of transcribe it to our wood frame structures is not the smartest thing to me. But yet a lot of people try and do it and they move the air barrier to the inside of the wall. And I tell people, been doing it as long as I have. Like, this is my opinion. I'm beyond debating it with you. You want to go do it that way? Go ahead. You do it that way. We have tried and true methods that, they work. Our clients love it. Their houses perform well. We don't have problems in our houses. This is how I do it. I'm not going to debate it with.
So the zip sheathing, there's a lot of different products that you have in the US that we don't have here in Australia. And the zip sheathing is one of them that gets a lot of social media attention. It looks pretty cool when a house is all completely wrapped in that green board. Could you tell us a bit about what it is and why it works so well?
So it's simply just an integrated weather resistant barrier. So I don't know, in Australia, you guys probably do a wood framed wall, plywood, or some kind of substrate and then put a membrane on it, right?
Ply gets used as bracing. A lot of houses don't have that substrate on the outside of the frame as standard. It's usually just a timber frame and then a membrane.
Right. And so basically what is happening is at the factory, that membrane is being laminated to the sheathing. And
Hmm.
so it comes out
Okay.
the assembly line already together. And
So that would
then
be the
so
same
we
as
can
what we
put it
have.
up.
Like we have a product here, like a peel and stick membrane. So they would put the ply on the wall
Yes.
and then put the peel and stick membrane on it. And that would basically be the same thing.
Yes, we're just doing it at the
Yeah.
factory and it's
Yeah.
coming
Okay.
out as an integrated product as
Yep.
opposed to two separate products that get done.
And you tape your overlaps and everything like that as well.
And then
Your
you take the
joints.
joints, right?
Yep.
The field of the panel is highly successful because it's adhered to in the factory. The failure mode now is what happens at the joints and putting the tape on,
Yep.
rolling the tape, making sure we get a good seal, all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay. It's time for a quick sponsor shout out. Today's episode of the Building Sciology Poddy is proudly brought to you by our amazing sponsors, Enduro Builders and Climasure. A huge thank you to these incredible businesses for supporting the podcast and helping us spread the word about better buildings to live and breathe in. Your support makes this podcast possible. Please head over to their websites and follow their social pages. So Did we cover effectively why houses don't have to, like why we should have airtight houses, but materials should be open? Like, I want to sort of discuss this houses need to breathe topic so that the listener can understand the difference.
So do I have the liberty of quizzing you?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So why do we build a house?
Have a roof over our head and to be
Fundamentally,
safe.
yes, to be safe, but basically to gain control. Because if we don't have a house, that means I'm outside and I don't have control over the weather. I don't have control over the heat, the cold, the snow, the rain, none of it. Animals, whatever. So I build a building to gain control. Now, with that comes the idea that my goal should be to gain the utmost control, not just mediocre control, but utmost control, right? So if I have a house that say is very poorly built and say 25% of the volume of air is leaking out of that house, right? I don't have any control now of the temperature. I go buy a unit of energy, I convert it to heat in a cold climate. I put it in my house and then it just goes right out through the wall. So I might as well open the window and just start throwing 10s and 20s out the window, right? Because that's what I'm doing essentially, right? And it's the same thing if we reverse it and say we're doing a project in Texas. Well, I'm buying a unit of energy, in that case, probably electricity, and converting the energy to a cooling system. And I'm sending that cooling system down a series of ductwork to provide comfort to me. And I want ultimate comfort. I don't want mediocre comfort, right? If you said I set my thermostat to 72 and I said, well, would you be okay if the room ended up being 68? You'd say, hell no. I set it to 72. I want 72-degree air in that room. So why does air tightness fall short of comfort, but temperature isn't allowed to, right? Why wouldn't you say, well, I want an airtight structure, but it's okay if 20% of the house leaks? Well, no, it isn't. I mean, would anybody be okay putting their baby in a crib and then going over to the window and cracking it a quarter of an inch in the wintertime and saying, we'll just let the air come in? Because that's essentially what you're saying when you say, oh no, you don't want to mess with air tightness. You want the buildings to breathe. The idea of breathing is, we can play the game of semantics. And I would say, yeah, I mean, buildings don't really need to breathe. They have the need to, or they have to have the need to be able to dry, right? Because things can get wet. The problem that you're going to run into, like mold, which is always, we have a lot of fear mongers in the US, and fear mongers meaning people that develop a business based on instilling fear of mold in people. Oh, we got to do this test, we got to do that test, we got to do this, but the reality is that mold is a water problem, because without water activity I really can't have mold. You can't foster growth mold without water activity. So if I can shut down water management and do a really good job, then now I need to move on to air management and make sure that I don't have leaky areas that are taking higher levels of moisture to cold surfaces that condense. Because the minute that vapor condenses, guess what? I now have a water management problem again. So the air management problem simply transfers to a water management problem. And so when people say, well, houses need to breathe, no, they need to. Hey. No, sorry.
That's okay.
I have a great day. No,
hey,
you just
puppy.
saw a dog bark in the driveway. Stop it. Lay down. No. Goose, lay down. I am so sorry.
That can go in the
He's my
bloopers.
buddy. He just lays there quietly. No, I point at him. He barks more. Stop it, Goose. Enough. Oh, my goodness.
That's
Just
okay.
ignore him.
No, that's fine.
But if that condensation or the airstream hits a cold surface, then it condenses and I have a problem. Well, yes, buildings need to breathe, but what we're really talking about is buildings don't need to exchange air. they need to allow high levels of moisture to migrate to the outside if they need to, right? Basically, buildings need to dry. It's kind of like a Gore-Tex jacket versus a non. If you've ever skied 30 years ago versus skiing now, you'd get to the top of the mountain, you'd be freezing cold, you zip your coat up. By the time you get to the bottom of the mountain, you're sweating on the inside because there's nowhere for the moisture to go. Now we have these really cool materials that you go to the top of the mountain, you zip it up, you sweat on your ski trip down, the temperature increases, but I can now let that moisture out through that material because I have the ability to dry and I'm
Hmm.
not sweating inside. That's what we need to do is not buildings don't need to breathe. And this is the whole people don't really understand what building science is because they say things that are somewhat silly when they say buildings need to breathe. No, they don't need to breathe. Buildings just need the ability to dry when they
Hmm.
get wet. That's
Hmm. Thank you.
and I mean that you know one of the interesting things, Jess, is having been at Building Science Corporation, and I started there probably around 1996. So it was a while ago. And we're still arguing some of the things that Joe was arguing back in 1996. Like we haven't come around to the houses need to breathe. We don't want to build an airtight house. That's just stupid. You don't want to build an airtight house and ignore ventilation. I would definitely agree with that. So we need to provide the ventilation in our structures should we start getting them very airtight, like I'm suggesting we do. But also, I have enough clients now where we've done kind of passive house level of airtightness, which is very strict. I mean, we're probably talking, to put it in perspective, think of 8,000 square feet of floor area and the amount of air leakage is a business card
Hmm.
on that 8,000 square feet surface area, right? It's
How
not
many
a
square
whole
meters is
lot.
8,000 feet?
And that business card is 1,000 little pinholes. It's not a business card hole somewhere in the house. It's thousands of little pinholes that cumulatively measure the business card. And I have clients that say they sleep better, their allergies are gone, they dream like they've never dreamed before, like they
That sounds fun.
recover. Yeah. Well, I mean, I have one client, and granted, it's only a sample of one. They have two houses, and we did a house for them up in the mountains. So it's about 6,800 heating degree days. So cold, very cold climate. And their other house is leaky, old house. They hate it. They love coming to their new house. And they're avid outdoors people. Like they snowshoe, they cross country ski, they bike, they run, all of those things. So they have a need for recovery at the end of a day of say cross country skiing or whatever the case is, and they say their recovery rate is faster when they're in the new house. They dream
Wow.
there. They sleep better. They sleep deeper. And even they said they had a friend that came over. They actually had to go in and wake her up because this friend like usually wakes up, like 7 in the morning or something. It was like 9 o'clock, and the woman got up and Nancy, who's the wife owner of the house, said, my friend said, I've never slept that hard before. It was just so comfortable here. And I know these seem like these kind of crazy stories, but I have other clients that say the same. And now I'm asking clients, I call them like a year later and say, hey, how is the house? And it's like, are you sleeping better? They're like, you know what? I am sleeping. I didn't really, put two and two together, but I am sleeping better. And I was like, have you dreamed more? And they're like, yeah, it's a much deeper sleep. I feel more restored in the morning. So there's a whole bunch of things that are happening that when you build these houses and you build them the right way, that when you gain control, going back to that initial question of why do we build, when we gain control, then I can do whatever I need to do to the house. I can introduce outside air that's filtered. I can heat it, cool it, humidify it, dehumidify it, whatever the case is, because I have that control now. And in a shoddy house, I don't have that control. So it's like I put heat in, but it just goes out the walls, right? And it's just unbelievable.
And these are the experiences that you can't really relate to someone until they've felt it Like you can't imagine how you're going to sleep in your new house when you're designing it. You can't put yourself in your future shoes, unfortunately, unless you've actually been there and done it.
Yep. And we have a lot of clients, like, when we're reviewing, say, the windows, and, they tell me, "Well, we open our windows all the time." And I was like, "Yeah, that's because you live in a bad house right now. When you're gonna live in a really good house where you have control, chances are you're probably not gonna open the windows." They're like, "No, Steve, you don't understand. We love opening the windows." And then we build their house, and I talk to them a year later, and they're like, "Yeah, you were kinda right. Like, when we open the windows, now I can smell the pollen, now I can, this." It's like, when the windows are closed, it's the best environment I know inside my
Because it's
house.
also ventilated.
It's
There's fresh filtered air in
because
that
it's
house.
also ventilated, but we've gained control, right? It's kind of this little capsule, if you will, of control.
I guess the couple of things that you'd miss out on would be the movement of the air. A lot of people really like to feel that fresh breeze and the sounds that come from outside. A lot of people will say, "But I like to hear the birds." And you can still open the windows and get those things if you want to, but then you can close it up and regain control when you want to as well.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
and I think
Yeah,
that's the piece that
we
people are
still
missing. They
put
think
in.
it's one or the other.
Yeah, and it's not. You can have the best of both worlds, and we
Mm.
we deliver it, for sure.
Mm, mhm. Yep. Okay, let's talk about eaves, or in the US, you call them overhangs. So in Australia, probably in America as well, we love a good parapet and a flat roof. So, what is your rule of thumb
Yeah.
for the eave depth, and why is this so important?
Yeah, so, the first thing when I talk to people, and understand, a lot of our clients that come to us, they come with the notion of, "Hey, Steve, this is the last house we're gonna build. This is the last house we're gonna live in. All of this, I wanna leave it for my kids." Whatever the case is, they all have this same kind of notion of, "We want it done right." And so when you're talking about water management, there's certainly, yes, can you do a wall that is a straight wall with a parapet, no overhangs? You can. And you can probably, I would venture to say I could do it successfully, but I'm going to change the way I do some things to make sure that it can happen. Maybe we do a thicker wall, I recess the window in it a little bit more so that I don't have the overhang now outside of the building. It's kind of a negative space overhang instead of a positive space overhang. And so there's ways to kind of combat that concept. But, the thing that I learned from Joe is trying to dumb the most complex comments or concepts down to just simple things when that people understand. So if I'm talking to clients about water management, and I say, "Okay, you're going outside, it's pouring rain. What's the first thing you do, or what's the last thing you do basically before you walk out the door?" And, they grab an umbrella. "Well, why do you do that?" "Well, to keep the water off of me." "Okay. So what do you think the best way to keep a window from leaking is?" "Don't let it see water," right? Put an overhang, put something on that sheds the water, and if the window doesn't see water, it can never leak.
Mhm.
And, we've got buildings that have big porches and overhangs that the window would never, ever see water. But there are some other ones that can see water. And so when you're asking kind of, do we have some rules of thumb in the overhang? I like to make the overhang at least twice as big as the distance from the top of the window to the soffit when I can. So that 2-to-1 ratio means that the water's not going to hit the top of the window. And we did extensive window testing, flashing testing for about a year and a half when I was there with Nathan. We traveled around the country, worked with the leading manufacturers developing flashings and stuff. That this was when all those adhesive tapes were kind of coming on board and such. And we realized that when windows leak, most of the time they leak, it's at the head of the window, and then the water comes down the jambs of the window into
The
the
side.
sill and creates problems.
Okay.
So targeting the head of the window is kind of should be your number one priority. And so tucking that up underneath that roof eave in that 2-to-1 ratio has kind of become a somewhat of a rule of.
Mhm. So if I think about Australian houses, usually have we talk in meters rather than feet and inches. 2.7 ceilings, we have a 2.4 window head, and we generally have 600 mil eaves. So that's a 300 mil height difference between the head of the window and the ceiling, and then a 600 mil eave. That's a fairly standard Australian design. So that's good.
Okay.
We're following your
Yeah.
rule of thumb by default.
Yeah. No,
That's good to
that
know.
is good. And water management, I mean, I would assume Australia is somewhat parallel, although you probably have some climates that don't get a whole lot of rain. I mean, we have some climates here too. Like if you go down to the Southwest, Arizona, New Mexico, they might get 5 or 6 inches of rain a year, and they'll get it in 2, 3 inch storms, right? So they kind of have two boxing matches that they have to survive every year with water. But then you go to Seattle or other places along the coast, well, you might have 60, 80 inches of rain, or 40 inches of rain, depending on, where you are. That's more spread out, 50 or 60 rainstorms where you're getting 3/4 of an inch of rain. So a lot more, and with the way the weather patterns are, it's really weird now because you can have the winter where, we'll have a day here that might be 30 degrees, 25 degrees, and then 3 days later it's 55 degrees and it's
Yeah.
raining. And you have all of this snow that might have got dumped the week before. Now the rain is warm enough so that not only is the rain, but it's melting the snow. So you have this huge water load around your building and on your building or on your flat roof that you have to deal with now, that you have to, you know, solve for, which growing up, we would have snow fall in the end of October and it would stay snow until, end of March, beginning of April. That's all changed.
Change now. Yeah, well, a lot of Australian towns are on the coast. The majority, I don't know what percentage it is, but it's a lot. A lot of our population is on the coast. So those coastal towns do tend to get a reasonable amount of rain, but they certainly have areas that have more than others. Adelaide, for example, is drier than,
Yeah.
up in the tropics as a general. Like they have up there, they have the wet season and the dry season. They don't have summer, autumn, winter, spring the same way we do down south. So
Gotcha.
yeah, for sure.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And we're pretty close to that. I would say probably, 75% of the US population probably lives within 50 miles of the ocean.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's an attraction that's probably true of any country you go to in the world. It's just living on the coast is a lot more fun and enjoyable and desirable than, say, living 400 miles inland.
Yeah, I definitely enjoy living on the coast. I'm down there almost every day
There you
on the
go.
beach.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's go back to some of the Joe Lstiburek teachings or the Building Science Corporation perfect wall that has been made famous by Joe. And we're talking about all those control layers, let me see if I can get this in the right order: water, air, vapor, thermal. And
Yes.
on the perfect wall, they are on the outside of the structure. All of those layers are on the outside, even the thermal layer. So in Australia, we put our insulation in our studs. We've got 90 by 45 studs or a 2x4. We don't always wrap our walls, especially if they're like a brick veneer wall in the little sort of volume home space. It's not mandatory in Australia to do that at this point in time. For some cladding types, it is based on like manufacturer warranties and things like that. And that is a control layer of sorts, depending on how it's installed. But I am wondering if you have like an entry level budget version of the perfect wall that we can try and implement in Australia to try and address
Yeah, I mean,
some of those control layers.
I think it's there. It's in what you said, right? Putting insulation outboard of that air barrier, or it's, or how can I call it, the way we describe it, Peter and I, when we talk about it, when you look at a wall assembly, what you're really trying to understand from an ability to dry and a vapor perspective is what is the most restrictive component of that wall system, right? And if we were doing a 2x4 wall with plywood, a building paper, and then an exterior siding, the most restrictive layer is the plywood from a permeability perspective. Like moisture is going to slow down as it moves through that. And so if you have an abundance of moisture in a cold climate, it's going to accumulate on the inside face of that. If it doesn't have the ability to dry rather quickly, you might get enough moisture that the cold surface in the wintertime is going to condense it and you have a problem. So you put rigid insulation on the outside. And the reason you do that is to warm that condensing surface temperature, because the difference between condensation and not is 1 degree, right? It's dew point. So in some cases that might be, I don't know, 60 degrees. If you keep that surface temperature at 61 degrees, all the vapor is going to accumulate, but it's just going to sit there in your insulation as vapor. And when the season turns around, that vapor is going to migrate back to the inside of the house and basically just move from high to low. What you don't want it to do is get to a point where that temperature drops down to the 61 degrees or 60 or 59. And now it's a cold surface, you get that accumulated moisture and it condenses. So Joe's perfect wall is, and you're explaining it from a cold climate perspective where you want to put that insulation on the outside of the wall where it would still work for heating climate also, but a large amount. Now, we just did a project and I called it a perfect wall. And in some of my social media posts, I kind of jokingly said, "Is this the best built wall in America?" And I called it a perfect wall. It had insulation on the inside, but the idea for me about a perfect wall is the most restrictive layer was the OSB of the zip. And we built a wall on the inside, we sheathed it with zip, and then we built a wall on the outside and insulated it on the outside. So we didn't do rigid insulation, we just did a blown in stone wool insulation in both walls.
So you
But
did a double stud?
the reason, yeah, basically it's a double stud wall, but the sheathing is not on the outside, it is in the middle of the wall.
Yep.
And that's the key to it being perfect because it always stays warm.
Mhm.
And if you did a you dissected that wall, it would be very easy to simply just draw an arrow from that OSB to the inside and say, I can dry to the inside, or from the OSB to the outside and say, I can dry to the outside. So regardless of how that wall gets wet, as long as I never get condensation in the wall, who cares about accumulating moisture, right?
Mhm.
That never hurts anybody. I mean, look at Louisiana. You go outside, it's 98% relative humidity. It's not hurting anybody. It's just very uncomfortable, but there's just a lot of moisture in the air. So I can have a lot of moisture in my wall as long as it never condenses. And then at some point, the climate's going to reverse and that's just going to dry out for me. And you just want to make sure you're drying more than you're wetting so you don't get an abundance of accumulation.
So, excuse me. You said a minute ago something you made reference to a cold climate, insulation on the outside of the stud being better for a cold climate, not necessarily for a warm climate. I thought the perfect wall worked in all climates.
Yeah, well, that's what I did kind of retract that a little. That says it probably works in both climates.
Right. Okay.
The If you put it in the southern climate, probably the difference is doing like a foil faced or doing some type of barrier on the outside of the wall so that moisture doesn't migrate in would be the one change. Right. In the southern
Yep.
climate, you're worried about the moisture coming in from the
Yep.
outside. In a heating climate, you're worried about the moisture from the inside trying to go outside.
Yep. So that vapor control layer, that layer would just need to be different.
Yeah, the vapor drive is just simply reversed
Yeah. So you would just
in this
that
situation,
vapor control layer
depending
would
on
just
the
need
season.
different properties depending on
Yeah,
climate.
exactly.
Yep. That makes
And you have a
complete
lot of
sense.
places like where we live, I don't know how it is where you are, but we have areas certainly down south like Louisiana, Florida, that it's hot and humid in the summer, a large portion of the year. It gets a little cooler, but it never gets really cold.
Mhm.
Here in New England, our problem is that we have very cold winters, but our August is the same as Louisiana and Florida. And so our climate is a much wider spectrum that we have to solve for both conditions.
Yeah, we have similar issues in Australia. Adelaide is a good example. We don't get really high humidity, but we get 40-degree, 45-degree days in summer, which for you is like 110 degrees or something like that, and down to frost in or 5 degrees Celsius, which is maybe 45 degrees or something like that for you. So we have very, very cold winters and very, very hot summers. We have days where they can be very extreme. So we too have to solve both problems, but we don't have the humidity. Generally, we get a day or two maybe of high humidity, and then it goes away. So
Okay. So you're probably
yeah,
more like a New Mexico that, when we would go down there it would be, yeah, 95 degrees Fahrenheit, but almost no humidity. Like you wouldn't sweat
Yeah,
because
it's
it just
awful.
evaporates,
It's
right?
much prefer a lot of South Australians don't like the humidity, but I can handle heat if the air isn't dry,
Okay.
like
Yep.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
personal
that's how it
preference.
is in, like, New Mexico is it's
Yeah,
like you're in an oven baking. It's
exactly.
yeah, yeah,
You open the door and it's like
yeah, exactly.
it's terrible.
It strangles you.
Yep. So, is there a budget-friendly option of the perfect wall that we can implement? Like, or is that just kind of what we're doing with a stud wall, insulated stud wall and a membrane
Yeah,
that's
I mean,
really, really well taped?
a 2 by 4 stud wall with as much insulation as you can afford on the outside of it is probably the best wall you could build
Okay.
and the most forgiving.
External insulation, people, if we can just get our heads around externally insulating.
Yeah. And
Just that happens so
I
rarely.
actually have a little story about that one, Jess, because as a young architect, we were at the office, and Joe's mentor, Gus Handegor, he's no longer with us, but Gus was in the office. He was down there, he was doing some work. But anyways, he was in the kitchen having lunch, and I'm like, "Oh my god, nobody's around." I'm like, "I'm gonna go have lunch with Gus." Like, this is the perfect like, this is a young architect talking to a building science god, right? Like, Gus was
You'd have
at the
had so
time
much fun back in the day. Oh my god.
yeah, like Gus was probably he was teaching Joe, so if that's
Yeah.
any, understanding of who Gus was. And I
Yeah.
remember sitting down and going, "All right, Gus, what is the best wall I can build?" He says, "Just build the wall, put as much insulation on the outside as you can afford. Chances are you're gonna be fine." And then he just went back to eating lunch. Like I was expecting long description and he just kind of spills that out and then goes back to eating like there's no more kid, get away from me, like
Yeah.
there's no more of this conversation, that's it. And that also taught me a really great lesson though, because Joe is often heard saying it's not rocket science, it's building science. And what I see a lot, and I'll sit in on BS and beers and different people talking and Zoom calls and all of these kind of
Mhm.
community type educational things. And man, some builders and architects really want to just complicate the hell out of a wall section or a roof section. And it's like, guys, we have to build this for a fair price. Let's just keep it really, really simple.
Mhm.
And, and kind of in line with like Gus, it's like, this isn't rocket science. This is building science. Just keep it really simple. We don't need to, airtightness. Like everybody's, oh, we use this, we use that, we turn this up and we tape this off. And it's like they have all these funky details. And I was like, man, you're killing the builder. Just do this, this, and this, and you're gonna be fine,
Mhm.
and that's going to solve your problems. And it does for us. Get really good air tightness numbers, and we're not. And I think part of it is also, my means to justify it is I work with a lot of builders. The one where we did this perfect wall, Josh, he's never done any kind of energy efficient house. And, we gave him a few details. We talked through them, we walked through them. And now he just built a house that was 0.18 ACH 50. It's, under 30% of what Passive House is. And
Mhm.
he was ecstatic. We were teasing him on the job site when we were there doing the blower door, like, oh, now Josh's head's going to swell. And, but the reality is none of this stuff is really that hard. And, in I'm guessing we're kind of on the downhill slope to our conversation here. So I'm going to take it to where I think the next steps are, right? In that understanding building science as it isn't rocket science. Just keep it really simple. Don't do dumb things, as Joe would say, and just come up with a few of your rules and then just stick to your guns and just build really good houses with very good conscientious details. And I don't know down there if they try and designate, like here in America, man, we have, lead platinum homes, lead homes, we have healthy homes, we have passive houses, we have Energy Star. Like we have a library of different types of measurements on a house and programs. And we tend to use the terms high performance quite often. I don't know if you guys use it down there.
Yeah.
And I I couldn't be kind of more sick of using the term high performance. It's like when we build a house, it's a series of decisions that I need to make with my client, right? They have a certain budget, we have a builder that has certain skills, we have a certain block of materials that are available at this particular time.
Mhm.
My job as the architect is to knit all of those together. Knit the details with the builder's abilities, materials at the time, and the client's budget, and come up with a scheme of things that the builder and can do, but basically just satisfies those thoughts. High performance, okay, so yes, it's a really great performing wall, but like that perfect wall, the homeowner came to me and said, Steve, I've been living in South Dakota my whole life. Wind blows through our houses up here. And like I've been up there, we visited a job site with the Josh. It's our next build. There were 70-mile-an-hour winds when we were there. Like I had to lean into the wind to walk across this field. And it's like it's not uncommon there because it's this, prairie where the wind, it's just flat land and the wind goes through it. And so the homeowner sits there and says, wind blows through these houses. I want a really good energy efficient house. I don't want to hear the wind. I don't want to feel the wind through the house. I want you to give me the best wall I can do. And we worked through the budget and stuff. And that's where we came up with the double wall, perfect wall
Mhm.
down the middle of the wall. And so when I post it, people are like, well, who can afford this? Who can do this? It doesn't matter. This client came with a specific set of parameters and a budget that could sustain those decisions.
Mhm.
Now, if their budget was 30% less, that wall would look a lot different. And we would design a wall to a 30% less budget. Fortunately, we had the ability to have a really good budget to build these people a really good house, and they love it.
Mhm.
Like he already has his first energy bill, a few months ago, and it was like next to nothing. It was like three times the energy bill he had in his house that he was living in that was about half the size,
Mhm.
right? And so we do this. High performance, it's kind of like our value when we started out. It is something that we can suggest that's a higher level, something that we can aspire to. It's higher performance than what we have. But for me, doing this all these years, I want to just say it's just a different set of decisions that we made. And
Mhm.
are we going to get better performance? Yes. But you can go and buy a car and I can bring it to a customization shop and say, give me more horsepower out of this engine. And they say, well, we can spend $2,000 and get you this. We can spend $5,000 and get you this, or we can spend $10,000 and turn it into a race car. What do you want? Right? It's just certainly different levels of performance. Well, that's what our houses are. They're not the term high performance, the problems I have with it is immediately when you're talking to people that aren't familiar with it, the price goes up, right? If you're
Yeah.
talking to a builder that's never done it and you say, "Hey, we're going to develop this high performance house for our client." Well, they're in their minds is like, "Okay, this is going to cost more money."
Well,
And
yep.
yes, maybe it will cost 5 or 8%. It's not costing 30% more. So we need to kind of get rid of that and just say, listen, Johnny, we're going to sit at the table with our client and we're going to go through everything, right from the footing, right through the roof, and we're going to question everything and we're going to come up with a solution that is the recipe that meets the client's budget and their performance metrics. And
Mhm.
if that doesn't quite match, then we're going to go to the client and say, what do you want to do? We can lower the performance to meet your budget, or you can bring your budget up to meet the performance spec. What do you want to do?
Mhm. It's a
And let them
conversation.
choose. Yeah, it's
And
that
that's
simple.
And that's the collaboration piece that we go on about a lot is, you just have to the outcome depends so heavily on the early collaboration between the builder, architect, and client, and all of the consultants, all of the trades. Like, you all have to be talking about what the next decision's gonna be.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's different for everybody because people
Yeah.
always sit there and because of my conversations with the builders, I think I have a very good handle on, okay, if we did that, it's
Yeah.
probably going to raise the cost X amount of dollars. But the reality is I could go to 10 different builders here in New England and I could ask them, we have this house. Is it cheaper to tear it down and build new, or is it better to renovate
Mhm.
and build around it? 5 out of the 10 are gonna say, "Yeah, renovate it. It's certainly a lot less expensive," because that's their perspective. The other 5 are gonna sit there and say, "No way is it gonna be cost effective to renovate. Just tear the thing down. Let me start from scratch. My framers aren't straightening out walls and all this. We're just building new walls. We're not cutting
Mhm.
new openings into old walls." And to some builders, they say, "Yeah, that's really not a problem. We can just renovate it." So a lot of it when I'm talking to clients is we want to get that builder in early because they hold the purse strings, right? Like I can tell you what I think it's going to cost, but that doesn't matter because what I think it's going to cost isn't going to go into the construction contract. What the builder thinks it costs goes into the construction contract. And that's the
Mhm.
one that matters. And that's why they have to be sitting at that table, like you said, for that collaborative effort so that, you know, and we do. We have a bunch of builders that like right from the very first meeting, they're sitting in on the meeting. And it's real easy when a client says, "Oh, well, I want a really nice wood burning stone fireplace in that great room." And it's like, okay, that great room is 2 stories and you want it to be a real wood burner and stone and that's a big foundation. Well, this is, an $80,000 plus fireplace that we're talking. And they're sitting there going, "Oh my God, $80,000." And the builder says, "Yeah, actually, Steve, it's probably more like 100K." And now all of a sudden the homeowner realizes, okay, if I really want that, I have to make sure that the budget is going to allow for that 100K to put that fireplace in. Or
Mhm.
we can talk about maybe it's not maybe it is a wood burner, but we're getting a kit where we can just insert a pre-manufactured fireplace into the wall that's a wood burner and we can put a, you know, thinner stone veneer instead of a real stone around the outside and that 100K might go down to say, 50 or 55K or something now, and that's
Mhm.
more reasonable. Or you just say, well, I didn't know it cost that much. Let's just take the fireplace out. We don't really need it. And that's, again, conversation with the homeowner, everybody wants everything until they have to write the check for it. And then now there's decisions to be had. Do I really want that fireplace? Do I even need that fireplace? Do I need that standalone tub in my bathroom? Like I was only putting it in because my realtor said that I should have a bathtub in there. We're probably never going to use it. And so I tell clients, on the first meeting, I said, I would use the 75 or 80% rule. Think about what you're going to do 80% of the time and put your money there, right? If
Mhm.
if you're going to take one bath a year, it's probably not worth the extra 8 grand to account for a bathtub in your master. You know, don't put the bathtub in, and instead of spending 8 grand, take an extra 2 grand and put it into the shower and make the shower that much nicer and maybe a little larger, and you're going to be much
Mhm.
happier,
Mhm.
right? And that's my job as kind of as an architect is that I'm just always kind of massaging the idea of design, budget, personalities with the husband and wife because a lot of times they don't align, so I have to play referee there.
I feel like architects become marriage counselors.
Yeah, I have some real crazy stories of a couple
Yeah.
times where meetings I've had to just get up and leave and say, "There's obviously you guys need some stuff that you need to figure out here, and when you figure it out, give me a call." But getting back to that whole performance and stuff, I don't think we need to put these labels. I don't like it, and there's more people trying to create more labels and stuff, and I'm like the last thing the industry needs is more labels to disseminate. Let's just figure out what are the best decisions for this project and
Mhm.
move on.
Mhm. Mhm. I feel like you've been in a in a pretty unique position in your career. In terms of getting out onto site, you're always on site. You're always drawing, drawing something that you're looking at or what, you're drawing something that needs to be built. You're very hands-on, and as you say, you've had a lot of conversations with builders and trades over your career that have informed your practice. Was that something that you were told, like, taught to do, or was that something you just did? Because I don't know if all architects are as hands-on as you have been on site.
No, they aren't, as a matter of fact, because when I got out of school and, like, when you go to work at, like, these larger architecture firms, say, in Boston, like, you get, like, chained to a desk somewhere
Mm,
in the a deep corner, and people bring you stuff and say, "Do this, and when you're done,
yeah.
call me, and I'll come get it, and we'll review it." You're not allowed to go out to the job site. You're not allowed to do this and do that, and the benefit of being at Building Science Corporation was a lot of our work was teaching builders things that the building science of buildings, right? Exterior
Mm,
insulation, how to install windows properly. A lot of my job was to go out and install a window with them. And
yeah.
because I drew the detail, it was like, okay, Steve, why don't you go out and install the window? And I'm like, oh, great. Here's a young architect who's definitely not going to be favored on the job site trying to tell the and so I walked out there and developed kind of this idea. Listen, I'm not here to tell you how to do it. I'm here to figure out what the best way to do it is. And the minute you kind of tap into their knowledge, they realize that you're not an adversary, you're a collaborator and a team member, and we're just trying to figure this out. That's it.
Mm,
And
mm,
and even now, I go out and install the first couple windows because a lot of builders are still not familiar with the Euro style windows and tilt turns, flangeless windows. And I tell them, I'm not out here to lecture you guys on how to put in windows. I'm going to show you what those details look like in real life. If you want to change something, let's have that conversation. That's why I'm out here. If you
mhm.
think there's a better way to do it, I welcome that because I'll modify my details in the future to solve for this better decision that you're going to teach me. I'm not coming out here saying I have all the answers. I'm coming out here saying I have a way to do it. Let's talk about that way and make sure it still is the best way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I hope that any architects listening take away from that, because there's a real tension in my experience between architects and builders, and I think that early collaboration can solve that, having conversations, going out to site. I think that's really, really important. You're on the same team.
Yeah, and it is, and I don't know if you know it, but both one of my daughters and my son both went to architecture school, so they work in the office with me. And, so the whole education thing, like, it totally got regurgitated. Like, I'm thinking about how did Joe talk to me is how am I going to talk to Lexi and Stevos? And how
Hmm.
am I going to teach them this concept of vapor drive or thermal resistance or water management at a windowsill? Like, how are we going to do this? And it's really interesting because my son, he does probably 90% of my videoing. And so it's kind of like it takes me back to the times where I'm walking around with Joe in a building talking about it. Well, my son's sitting behind a camera hearing me talk about how to install a window and proper water management. And like it probably doesn't get any better for a young architect than to be on site with me watching me install a window and talk about how to do it. It's
Love
he's
that.
getting that first class knowledge and it's really interesting. This past year in September, we had or October, we had Build Show Live, our second one, and my daughter is presented with me in one of the presentations, and she was scared to death to do it. And I said, Lexi, trust me. You've been with me for 5 years, but you probably know as much as an architect that's been doing it for 10 or 15 years because you're getting a different education. The things we talk about in the office isn't talked about in other offices. And she did the presentation. I mean, we probably had 250, 300 people in the room, and she killed it. At the end of the presentation, one of my proudest moments was, you always get that line of people that come up and want to ask you questions about what you presented. She had her own line.
Love
Like
it.
there were like 20, 25 people in line. And I'm just sitting there going, yeah, I got to answer those questions, but I'm looking over going, yeah, that's my daughter over. line of 25 people coming up and asking her questions. And
I love
there's
that.
no greater privilege than to take something I absolutely love and devoted pretty much my life to a career in understanding this, and now getting to share it with two of my children that I I know I have to pass it on to them, right? It's like I'm not going to be here forever. So I need to make sure that we get that knowledge and I get it instilled in them. And yeah, it's like from a father's perspective, there's no greater privilege than to sit here and work with our kids. Like when I'm in the office, I travel a lot, but when I'm in the office, it's some of my happiest times because we just joke and, just insult each other but it's a learning experience too along the way. My son will ask a question and my daughter will be like, I can't believe you just asked that dumb question. And it's like, it's not dumb. And when they get into it, and then I have to play referee, but we have fun.
Never ends.
But anyways, it's like, you know, when you start a career and you've been doing it and you get up to say doing it for 30 years, you're starting to look at like, okay, let's go over the hill and let's kind of ease down the hill. And for me, I've gotten to the hill and I'm just saying, oh no, look there's a higher hill over here that I have to climb now because I have to put my kids in the best possible position that I can put them.
Hmm.
And so it's reinvigorated me that, instead of sitting there going, yeah, I'm not really going to do that detail. It's like, no, I got to figure this out so I can share that with them.
Hmm.
So it's really like kind of given me a booster shot to have them come on board and to do what I'm doing. And I love it even more because I get to share it with them.
Well, that's just congratulations on that. That just makes my heart happy. That's really, really, I liked listening to that.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
it is. It's great. I couldn't ask for a better situation.
It's really fantastic when your kids, my kids aren't quite old enough to be, the high school age, teenagers, but they haven't quite decided on their career paths yet. And I don't know if either of them are going to go into building science. It's not looking likely, but you never know. But I can't imagine anything that would make me prouder would be to have all of these conversations with them and pass on my knowledge to them over
You
the
you
coming
never
years.
know.
That would be, yeah.
Lexi wanted to be a veterinarian for the longest time, and then, like, as a sophomore in high school, she said, "You know what? I think I'm gonna go to architecture school, Dad,
Yeah.
and come back and work with you." And it was just yeah, it's great. Having both of them, and, like, some of my funnest times is, like, we get to go to conferences and, you talked about education and sharing, like, I place a very huge value on that because
Hmm.
I understand where I got my knowledge from. So, like, the 3 of us were just in Germany going to the Fontanelle, the Fensterbau, which is the largest window and door show in the world. And, we went there for a few days, and I got to team up with a couple window guys I know that know windows better than most people, and there were times where Lexi was with my friend Patrick and they were off talking to one of the reps about shading devices and she's asking very intelligent questions and I'm sitting here going, you go girl, go get it, go get after it.
Hmm.
Putting them in a position to succeed is very important to me. and
Hmm.
and bringing them, and I tell them, listen, we're going to go out to Germany, it's going to be fun, but this isn't a picnic. You're there for a purpose. Like, ask questions, talk to these people and get some answers. And we do. And then we go out to dinner and we have fun and joke and laugh about the dumb questions that we all asked during the day. And yeah, and we have fun. But
Love
yes,
that.
that's just a great time to, be able to say, "Oh yeah, this is my son and daughter. They work with me." And it's like I probably don't have a line that's probably more prouder than that.
Good on you. Good on you. That's fantastic. I have still got at least 3 or 4 other questions that I wanna
Sure,
go into, but
let's bring
we
them out.
are out of time. You need to get on with
Okay.
your evening. It's getting on for 7 PM where you are. Um,
Well, I can always come back in like 6 months or something, and then you can put your questions together. You tell me.
I would love that. Let's make it a date. We will set up another the conversation. I would love to have you back, Steve. But we will wrap up this conversation now. But the last question I want to ask you, which is the same question I ask all of my guests, is out of everything that you have learned in your career, what is the one thing that you would like the listener to take away? The one thing you want them to know?
The one thing, and I guess it's part of the reason that I went out there, and I forget exactly what the quote is. It's by Frank Lloyd Wright, but to truly understand what you do, you have to go out to where the work is being done. Like, I could sit here and write and read books on how to draw a roof framing plan. But if I don't get out to a job site and actually see the rafters getting installed and how they interact and create the roof, I'm not doing myself justice. You
Mm-hmm.
need to get out there and as an architect and have that conversation with the people doing the work. There's so much of a wealth of knowledge that, a lot of people or a lot of architects will say, yeah, he's just a dumb framer. Let him frame the roof and put the building up. Hell no. You go and ask him a question, and this guy is like, oh, yeah, 20 years ago, we did a wall system like that, but we didn't have this tape or adhesive. So this one's much better because of this. And we had to do that. And it's like, all of a sudden, I'm sitting there going, oh my God, let me get my notepad because this guy's just dropping a ton of knowledge that he's a framer, but they're very humble guys. But when you pry them, man, there is a wealth of knowledge in
Yep,
those
I
guys.
found the same thing. Finding passionate trades is so exciting. They know their stuff and they want to tell you about it. It's great.
Yeah,
Yeah, yep, fantastic. All right, Steve, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure and privilege to talk to you today. And
thank
yeah, I
you.
look forward to having you back. Enjoy your evening. Thank you so much for coming.
No problem.
All right, bye.
Bye now.
That is all for today. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you would like to listen into the types of conversations that I have all the time, please subscribe on your chosen platform. Rate the show, leave a comment, whatever you like, share with your friends and family. I'd love for you to spread the word about the Building Soilology Potty. Thanks again. Happy healthy building.